was rich. I remember who I was. I was lost, I was blind, I was running out of time. Sin separated, the breach was far too wide. But from the far side of the chasm, you held me in your sight. So you made a way across the great divide, left behind heaven's throne to build it here inside. And there at the cross, you paid the debt I owe, broke my chains, freed my soul. For the first time I had hope. Thank you, Jesus, for the blood applied. Thank you, Jesus, it has washed me white. Thank you, Jesus, you have saved my life, brought me from the darkness into glorious light. You took my place, laid inside my tomb of sin. You were buried for 3 days, but then you walked right out again. And now death has no sting, and life has no end.
Good morning, Coastline. Merry Christmas, everyone. Let's stand together and let's give God all the glory today. Amen? Let's do it. Angels from the realms of glory wing your flight o'er all the earth. You who sang creation's story now proclaim Messiah's birth. Come and worship, come and worship, worship Christ the newborn King. Shepherds in the field abiding, watching o'er your flocks by night. God with man is now residing, yonder shines the infant light. Come and worship, worship Christ the newborn King. Emmanuel, you are the God who saves us. You're worthy of all our praises. Emmanuel, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. Oh, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. We welcome you, God. We welcome you, Jesus. Come and worship Christ the newborn King. God is with us even now, his love is here. Come and worship Christ the newborn King. is with us, even now. His love is here. His love is here. Emmanuel, Emmanuel, you are the God who saves us. You're worthy of all our praise today. Sing Emmanuel, Emmanuel, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. Oh, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. You are God with us, Emmanuel. Sing this with me. Hark the herald angels sing. Hark the herald angels sing. Glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild. God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise. Join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing. Glory to the newborn King. Christ by highest heaven adored. Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold him come. Offspring of a virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with men to dwell. Jesus our Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing. Glory to the newborn King. Oh, Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace. Hail the Son of Righteousness. Light and light to all he brings. Risen with healing in his wings. Mild he lays his glory by. Born that man no more may die. Born to raise the sons of earth. Born to give them second birth. Hark the herald angels friends, we're going to go into this time where we give now sacrificially to our God. And, you know, when I think of the cradle, when I think of Jesus coming to earth, I can't help but think of the cross. I can't help but think of the resurrection. Because this is all one story, right? The Christmas time is not a separated time where we talk about a different story. But instead, in Christmas time, we talk about the beginning of the story of God coming to save humanity and sending his only son so that we might have life and life in the full. Amen? So these two things are connected for us. So when we think, today, the sermon and everything, our whole focus today is on the protection of God. That our God is a God who sees us, who protects us, who walks with us, who cares deeply about our safety and wants to walk alongside us and keep us safe from harm and safe from sin for eternity. That's his goal. That we might have no more sin, no more grieving, no more pain. And so as we sing today, I want to turn our eyes to the cross as we give today. Because that's part of this story. Amen? Amen. So, okay, let's bow our heads together. So, Jesus, you came, and what's so amazing about that is that this God on high, this God who deserves to be given glory forever and ever in heaven, who deserves to sit on the throne, left the heavenly realms, left the comfort of the throne, and wrapped yourself in this human body so that you might walk with us, so that you might be near to us, so that we might know that our God cares about us, that we're not just you didn't just set us spinning and leave. But instead, God, you're here, intimately involved. So much so that you would grow just like we do. You would grow, and then, God, you would die a sinless death that you didn't deserve so that we might have life. So, God, in view of what you've done, God, in view of what you've given, Lord, our natural response is worship by sacrifice. Worship requires sacrifice. It requires some element of giving and some element of laying ourselves down. So it may be finances that we lay down today, or it may be our attention, it may be parts of our hearts that we want to hold on to, sins that we're holding deep inside. Whatever it might be, God, we just want to give you our first. We want to give you our best. God, we want to give you what you deserve, which is worship, attention, glory, and honor. Because you're our God who gave. So we love you, God. We give you this day. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's continue to sing as we give and worship God.
Because of Christ, I am alive. What a humble sacrifice, love that washed me clean, love that washed me clean, love that washed me clean. What a blessed mystery, His punishment, my peace, His punishment, my peace, His punishment, my peace. except the cross of Jesus Christ. May I not forget the blood he shed. It is by his death I am alive. May I never boast in anything except the cross of Jesus Christ. May I not forget the blood he shed. It is by his death I am alive. That's the truth. Because of Christ, I am alive. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Death has lost its grip on me. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Jesus rose in victory. He's alive, alive in me. Singing hallelujah, hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Death has lost its grip on me. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Jesus rose in victory. He's alive, alive in me. May I never boast in anything except the cross of Jesus Christ. May I not forget the blood you shed. It is by his death I am alive. Because of Christ, I am alive. Because of Christ, I am alive. Because of Christ, I am alive.
Can we do this together? Just as an act of surrender, as an act of just proclaiming that God, we are protected by you, we are loved by you. Can we close our eyes together and maybe let's put our hands up, raise our hands to the Lord together if you feel comfortable doing so. And I want to sing that again together. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Death has lost its grip on me. Jesus rose in victory. He's alive. He's alive. Alive in me. Let's sing that together.
Sing hallelujah, hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Death has lost its grip on me. Sing hallelujah, hallelujah. Jesus rose in victory. He's alive. Sing it again, alive in me. Sing hallelujah, Jesus Christ, my Savior. May I not forget the blood he shed. It is by his death I am alive. Because of Christ. Because of Christ, I am alive. Because of Christ, I am alive. And we have so much to celebrate Jesus for. Amen? Amen. And let's be seated together. It is good to worship together. Thank you, Michael and Jesse and team. And man, as we celebrate, I just want to say I love the tie-in as we say Merry Christmas to each other, this reality that we celebrate that Christ has come incarnate, the God-man in the flesh, dwelling on this earth. We celebrate that this Christmas season, but he did that so that he might dwell in our lives, dwell in our hearts through his Spirit. So for those of us that know him and follow him, what a great gift. And I just want to remind you, in the next couple days, as you say Merry Christmas to your family members and to the ones that you love, to be reminded that God came incarnate through his Son, that he might dwell specifically and personally with you in your life. Amen? Amen. That is good news. Hey, I'm Garrick. I'm on staff here. It's a privilege to be part of the Coastline team. And if you are new, we just want to say welcome. We're super excited that you've come this morning and joined us for worship. We have a wonderfully friendly team that will be out on the patio. And I just want to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, you'll find this welcome card in front of you, in the pew back in front of you. If you want to just fill that out, bring that with you. And it's a way for us to connect with you. We've got a gift we'd love to put in your hands just as a way of saying thank you and ask or answer any questions that you might have. And so stop by. That's a great opportunity. Also a reminder, there's a QR code on that and then also in the foyer. So if you miss any of these announcements, you can find them there on the QR code so you know what's going on here. I want to start off by just saying thank you to our congregation and all those that wrote for our Advent devotionals. I am caught up, and they were amazing. We have one last devotional tomorrow, and so make sure you check that out. If you missed any of the days, or maybe you missed all of it, it'll be up on our website through the end of this month, and so make sure you check that out. It's been so fun to hear the stories that God has embedded in our lives, that we not only get the chance to know each other as a family, as we get to know more knowledge of each other, but then how that encourages our personal faith as we hear your personal stories. So if you were a writer, I just want to say thank you so much. You have blessed the congregation. I want to give a huge shout out to my friend Lori Tom, our editor-in-chief. Lori, I'm going to have you stand up because the whole church needs to know you. But she does this out of a love and joy that God has given her, and you are a treasure to our family. So thank you, Lori, for all the editing you do to make all of us sound way better and way smarter than we truly are. So thank you. Also want to let you know that as we are in our Advent season, this is our time of year-end giving. We set a goal this year of $260,000. That is to help fund the ministry of 2024 and then set us up well and launch us into 2025. And then 10,000 of that is guaranteed to go to 2 missionaries that are part of our Coastline family. And so if you've already given to that, I just want to say thank you so much. We've already raised $108,500. Which is awesome. So thank you so much if you've given to that. If you haven't given yet, or if you'd like to give again, you can. Just want to let you know where we're at. And as the Lord leads you, all we ask here at Coastline is that you give generously and you give joyfully. Those are the commands in Scripture. And so as we step into that, we believe the Lord meets us and has great ministry here planned for 2025, okay? And then my last announcement to let you know, there's this little thing called Christmas Eve in 2 days. So Tuesday, we will meet right back here in this room. What is new for Coastline this year is since we realized we were trying to pack over 400 people into this small room, we're going to 2 services. So we have a 1 o'clock and a 3 o'clock at both services. We're going to have great worship. I get the privilege of teaching, and we have great kids moments and nativity scenes planned. So you're going to want to be there. I would ask that you invite your family and friends. This is a great cultural touch point that we still have with our beloved family and friends. Just come invite them to get some spiritual nourishment with us. And again, that's 1 and 3. At both services, the nursery will be open if you've got littles, which is great for them and great for us. It is a kids service, and so I will A, be short, and B, we will have kids packages for the kids. And so there'll be activities for them, and it will be a fun, festive family service. So again, this Tuesday, 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. If you missed any of those announcements, check out the QR code. I'm going to do this to have you stand up and kind of release you to interact with each other. Here's what I want you to ask each other. What is the one Christmas treat that you can't get enough of? Is it Christmas cookies, apple pie, fudge? What is it? So why don't you stand up and spend a minute sharing that with your friend next to you.
No.
Start talking, huh? This is what it looks like.
All right. Well, thank you. If you could take a seat, that'd be great. Merry Christmas. A soon-to-be Happy New Year to all of you. Happy Advent. This is why we don't let you do it, right? This is herding cats. Hey, well, good morning, everybody. Great to see you guys. Welcome to Coastline. I want to introduce my friend Kevin George, who's going to be reading the very long passage for us today out of Matthew. So thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning. Nice to see you all. All right, we got 23 verses, so buckle up. Here we go. Matthew 2, 1 through 23. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judea. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen where it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he had stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more." After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene.
Thanks, Kevin. We're in a series called Divine Encounters, where we are following kind of the angelic presence that is seen throughout the Nativity story and trying to ask the question, what does it mean? What is the significance to us today? Quite simply, we can't really find as many passages like this in Scripture where we see angels as present in interacting with human beings and guiding the narrative all along. Today's passage, it really focuses on the Magi who, although they are a part of the nativity story, they're a part of your nativity scene, all of the kind of happenings of this passage, it happens 2 years at least after the birth of Christ. Still, they're kind of brought into the story and are a part of the narrative in the Scripture. When we see this passage, the first question is, who are these Magi? And the answer is really, they're about 4 or 5 different things. The first thing that you need to know is that they are not kings, despite what you've heard in songs. They are not kings. They're, in fact, scholars. And the first way they're scholars, they're astronomers. These are students of the stars and of the planets, understanding comets and intricate math. These are people who were always studying the skies to understand what was happening. This is also because they were astrologers. There's a difference between those two words. Astronomers look at the skies and study what is happening there, but astrologers try to interpret what is happening in the stars and figure out how it relates to mankind. And so the Magi were students of the stars, but they were also studying the stars, believing it told them what would happen in the present and in the future. There were also court bureaucrats helping kings to run their government. They were advisors to the king. But finally, they're religious priests. They are serving foreign gods. Oftentimes, they're considered magicians who are tied into the spiritual world and have some sort of power that is there. Honestly, if you want to understand who the Magi are, the best picture of that is Jafar from from Aladdin. It's the same culture. The time frame's a little bit different there. This is probably taking place in the 1300s, but nonetheless, same role, same position, less talking parrots. So the question is obviously, why are Persian astronomers, bureaucrats, and magicians traveling 900 miles to see Jesus? Well, I think what's obvious is that they are familiar with the Jewish prophecies. They're familiar with this idea that one day a Messiah would come who would be the King of Kings. Now, the question is, how? How would they be familiar with these passages? And to understand that, you really have to go back into the middle of the Old Testament. You see, there was a time, this is in the time of the book of Jeremiah, when Israel was so disobedient that God said that he was going to punish them by taking them out of their land and making them slaves again. They had been slaves once in Egypt, and God had freed them. When they were disobedient, God put them back into slavery. This time it was to the nation of Babylon. Babylon, though, only stands for about 30 or 40 years while they're there before Babylon is destroyed by Persia. When Persia comes in and conquers Babylon, suddenly it finds that there's a mass number of Jews who are living there. And those Jewish people are servants in their court, and these Jewish servants become servants in the Persian court, specifically Daniel. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we know in the book of Daniel, are people who are serving within the Babylonian court and the Persian court. Because of that, it is almost certain that the roots of the Magi's knowledge of these Jewish prophecies can be traced all the way back to Daniel and to his friends. And so when a star appears, and when they have this history of kind of religion, suddenly we find that the Magi are drawn to something that kind of checks all of their boxes. Star in the sky, mysterious appearance, Jewish prophecies, powers that they don't understand. This becomes an opportunity for them to have a true once-in-a-life experience. And so they begin the journey that is there. I think it's interesting to just stop and ask the question, what is this star that would draw them so far? There's natural explanations about what the star could have been. We know that in the year 5 BC, Saturn and Jupiter essentially overcrossed one another, so it appeared to be one superstar. Perhaps that was it. We also know from Chinese and Japanese historians that there was a supernova that appeared in the sky about 3 BC. That might have been it as well. But again, these are astronomers who understand the stars and planets and skies. Chances are they would have known if it was a supernova or known if it was Saturn and Jupiter overlying one another. It's a possibility. It's not the one that I really believe. The one that I think that is happening is that in the scriptures, angels are oftentimes referred to as stars. I'm going to put up here Daniel 8:10. It says this: "It grew until it reached the host of heavens, the entire angelic beings, and it threw some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled them." Here, the host of heaven, the angels, are called a starry host, but it gets a lot more specific in Revelation 1:20. This is right before the letter to the churches. It says this: "That the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and of the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." This happens another number of other places in Scripture. Finally, there's an interesting thing in this passage in verse 9, where as they begin to follow the star moves. Because of these things, I think it is more likely that the star in the sky is an angel and not necessarily a physical star. But I could be wrong. But the arrival of the Magi, when they come to Israel, and when they come and visit Herod, and when they come to see the child, it places Mary and Joseph and Jesus in profound danger. The first danger that they face is from Herod, who is the king of the Jews. Now, the wise men, the Magi, they believe that if a king is to be born, then he must have been born in the palace. And so the first place that they go is to visit the king of Israel, Herod, and to see if he has had a child, but he hasn't. He's had a lot of childs in the past, which I'll talk about in a moment, but Herod is a very old man at this time, and he is not particularly healthy, and he has not had any children at all. And so the child cannot be his. Not only that, Herod is not actually the rightful king of Israel at all. He has stolen the throne from another family. You see, at this time, if you go back around 50 BC, the Hasmonean family, they were the ruling ones who were overseeing the passing of the kingship down from one to the other. But around 30 BC, there becomes a civil war in the Hasmonean family about who is going to take over the kingship. And Herod sees this fight between two Hasmonean brothers, and what he says is that he goes to Rome and says, if you will support me and give me an army, I will go defeat both brothers, and I will be loyal to Rome for the rest of my life. Rome says yes. Herod gets an army. He goes and defeats both Hasmonean brothers. Then he marries the oldest Hasmonean daughter, and then he kills off all Hasmonean heirs, including his wife. Herod is a really bad guy. Herod is ruthless. He is ambitious. There is almost nothing that he will not do to get and to keep power. And so when Herod hears that there is a child that is born who is the King of Kings and is the King of Israel, he sees it as an immediate threat to him, and it awakens all of his own old worst instincts. It also plays upon his fears that if Persian wise men are here, then they come representing the Persian government, and this means that there's not only an internal coup, but there's an outside enemy coming as well. And he's going to use the Magi to try to bring this child to him and to execute him. They're also in danger, not just from Herod and from earthly forces, they are also in danger from spiritual forces. If you go to the book of Revelation, and we're going to go here to Revelation chapter 12, we get an interesting picture of the nativity story, and it's told from a heavenly perspective. This is from Revelation 12, 1 through 6. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman was clothed with the sun, with a moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. This is portrayed as Mary, but actually it's probably a little bit more meant to portray Israel due to the crowning of 12 stars over her head. It's two people kind of conflated into one. Then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars, see it there? Stars out of the sky. It flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God into his throne, the ascension of Christ. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. We could go really deep into this, but it's a telling of the nativity story from the perspective of heaven. And here we see that Satan is fully aware of what is happening. He is aware that there's a child who's going to be born, a child who's going to be one of God, this child who's going to be from God, this child who's going to be the King of Kings, and he's prepared. And he has a plan, and he is there at the door waiting to destroy this child as soon as it was born. And so what we can see here is that Mary and Joseph and Jesus are at risk of earthly forces and also spiritual forces, and that part of the earthly forces that are there, Herod, are actually being influenced by the spiritual forces. That Herod acts, but he's not acting necessarily on his own. He is acting through the knowledge and through the power that Satan is giving him, and is being influenced by spiritual powers, although he probably doesn't even realize it, to do their will, to destroy this child. Herod's perspective is very small. Protect his throne. But what Satan and his armies are is the destruction of God's salvific plan for all of mankind. These powers are older and wiser and more ruthless and better informed than even Herod is. And so when you look at the story in all of its totality, what you can see is that Mary and Joseph and Jesus are incredibly vulnerable. And they really don't stand a chance. Joseph has no sword, he has no training, he has no ability to protect his family. Mary has no power, no alliances, no wealth. Jesus is a toddler, a baby who is still in diapers, and they are ignorant of the forces that are aligning against them, coming to destroy them and to kill them. Now, there's this part in the book of John where John says that if we took all of the stories of Jesus' life and put them into one book, there is no library in the world that could contain all of the stories. What we know about Jesus is this much. There's so many stories about him that we've never heard. So why did this story make it in? Why does Matthew include this story? Mark, Luke, John, they don't, but Matthew does. Why does Matthew, in all of the stories that he could have chosen, choose this one? I think it's because of this. It's a reminder that you and I still live in a dangerous world. This story is there to remind us that we still live in a world that is full of dangers and threats and enemies to us that sometimes we don't always see and realize, and they are both, yes, earthly, but they are also spiritual. There are still Herods in our world today, people with power who are incredibly hostile to Christ. And to live in this world means that at times we're going to face their threats. Bosses, people in government, people who have authority and power and leaders, at times they are still going to threaten God's people and to threaten his church. That means that for you and I to live in this world means that we're going to seem to face the same threats that Jesus did, which means that at times we're going to be attacked, and we're going to be marginalized, at times we're going to be judged and excluded, and that when it happens, we shouldn't be shocked. We should expect it. It is what it means to live in this world, and that you and I are called to withstand it with patient and faithful endurance. Not disoriented, not completely lost, not asking what is happening to us. We should expect that the world will act this way sometimes. And that you and I should not only expect that there's going to be Herods in the world, you and I should expect that at times a little Herod is going to come out of our own hearts. Look, Herod took a throne that was not his and was not willing to give it up for anyone, even for the rightful king. And there are times in our lives where you and I will choose to try to be the king of our own lives, and we will be hesitant about Jesus Christ ever exerting his kingship here because we like making the decisions and the calls of our life. There are places in our lives where you and I are still resistant to the rule and reign of Christ. You might not even be aware of what they are. Some of the sins that you and I have, we're completely aware of, but some of them we're not. You see, on this top level, there's the sins that you guys and I have, where they are the behaviors that we have. But if we go a level below that, there's also the thoughts that we have. Those can be pretty sinful too. And if we go below that, there's the desires and the emotions that we have. Those could be sinful too. And below that is even a subconscious level of the sins that we commit that we aren't even aware that we're doing it. We're not aware of all the things that are happening beneath the surface. You see, inside of us, there's a little bit of a Herod too, who's trying to keep as much power for ourselves so we don't have to give it up to God. And finally, we still have a spiritual enemy. We are told in Scripture that we need to fight the right enemies and to fight them the right way. That we do not fight in the flesh, that we do not fight with earthly weapons, but instead we fight with spiritual weapons. And we should always be aware of the fact that our faith is under attack at all times by a spiritual enemy. And at times, the things happening in the world around us are not simply because of the people who are running the world, but their spiritual forces are actually working in it and through it. And yet, even though Mary and Joseph are profoundly at risk, what I want you to see in this passage, and the reason why I think it is here, is that although they are at risk, they are also protected. Verse 13, when they had gone, the Magi, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and the mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." Herod and Satan are coming, but God provides, a last-minute escape plan for them. They're sent to Egypt, and there in Egypt, they're far beyond the reach and the power of Herod. He has no authority there, no ability to get them. His reach simply does not reach that far. God takes them to a place where Herod no longer has power to protect them there. You see, Herod is limited in what he can see and do, but God is unlimited. He can take them out of his reach, out of their grasp, to a place where he cannot know where they are, and to seal them and protect them and to guard them. Our God is incredibly mighty to save you and I. And what we're going to see, if we look at the rest of the passage and if we look at it closely, God is going to continue to protect this family throughout the rest of the chapter. This right here, the first story that we had where he sends them to Egypt, this is the second time in the nativity story where Joseph has received an angelic vision and dream telling him of what God is doing. The first time is when he's told that this child is of the Holy Spirit and he should take Mary home. The second time is when he's told to flee to Egypt, but it's going to happen 2 more times. An angel's going to appear to him in a dream and say, Herod is dead, you can go home. And the fourth time it's going to happen is an angel's going to tell him and say, don't just go back to Jerusalem, which is where he wants to go. Go back to Nazareth. I think that's so interesting. There's a couple things happening here. So when Herod says, where is the child supposed to be born? And when it looks at the prophecy, it says he's in Bethlehem, and they follow the star to Bethlehem. Mary and Joseph, 2 years later, are still in Bethlehem. They don't go to Bethlehem for the census and leave. They go to Bethlehem and stay. Away from family, away from his business, away from everyone who knew them. Why? It's got to be because life was pretty hard back home. And Bethlehem became a new place to be. And when it's time to go back to Israel, where does he want to go? He wants to go back to Jerusalem where Archelaus is ruling. But he knows that he can't go there, so God sends him back to Nazareth, back to the hometown, back to the place where he doesn't want to be. See, God has this plan kind of directing them there. And God, throughout all of the direction, through all of the guidance, 4 different encounters, all of it is mediated through Joseph. We forget about that sometimes. I forget about it. I don't think I ever saw it until I read the passage this week, that God has this ongoing, personal, and powerful relationship with Joseph. We have this picture of Mary, and maybe some of it comes from the Catholic Church. Maybe it's just because she's such a powerful woman of God, but she gets so much of the attention. But honestly, Mary gets 1 encounter, and Joseph gets 4. This isn't like a game where one of them is winning, but Joseph, we're told that he's a righteous man. And he receives more personal encounters with God than most people in Scripture. And God continually directs his protection of this family through Joseph. Joseph is the means through which the protection is going to happen. I just think that that's such a thing that we should notice and take account of. That this isn't just Joseph, who's this kind of guy trailing along in the story. He's an important part of it. And we see Joseph working to actively protect and to shepherd and to lead his family through all of it. And as I read it, the question for me is, I think I need a little bit more Joseph in my own life. This is sideways out of the sermon. This is not related to my big point. But what I think is that I could use to have a little bit more Joseph in my life in terms of how I lead my own family. And I say that as a pastor. Most of the time when I think about how I spiritually lead my family, it's as Bible trivia man. I'm really good at that. And I really like the idea about being a provider for my family. That does something for me. I like the idea about being a protector for my family. But what I think and I see in Joseph is that we see somebody who's not just physically protecting and who's not just physically protecting and physically providing, but spiritually protecting and spiritually providing. And that is something that I think I have always struggled with. And I don't think I'm alone. And the reason why I don't think I'm alone is because when we asked men to participate in the Coastline devotionals this year, you were all hesitant to do it. None of you wanted to say yes. The women were like, heck yeah, can I take 2? And guys would like not return a phone call for 2 weeks. And I think that's probably because you feel just as inadequate for that role as I do. That it is great to be a protector and it's great to be a provider, but it's hard to be a spiritual protector and a spiritual provider in it. Can I tell you what I'm thinking about for my own life? Before I'm going to get to spiritual protection and spiritual provision, and I've got grown kids right now, you know what I need to start with? I need to be a spiritual contributor in my kids' lives. If you don't know how to spiritually protect and spiritually provide, can you just spiritually contribute? Tell them what God is doing in your life. Tell them about what God has done in your life. Tell them about what you're praying for your kids. Get involved in their life. I think there's this little picture of Joseph in the story that, man, you and I can use as a star to guide our own parenting. End of the tangent. And even though Mary and Joseph are protected, they still really suffer in this story. Look, life's not been easy since they said yes to God. They are living away from home, away from family. It lets you know that they are looking to escape the day-to-day painful parts of it. And now they're on the run from the king. And they're living in a foreign land, and they don't know how long they're going to be there or when they're going to come back. Their stories have taken this detour that must have terrified them. They must have had so many sleepless nights, not knowing if they ever made the right call to say yes to God. And this story, again, it takes place over 3 years. It reads fast, but it happens really slow. And God is showing up in the 9th hour constantly. Protection doesn't mean that we won't suffer. We will suffer, yet in the suffering, we're still protected. And that's the thing that you and I can claim as well, that we will be protected even when we suffer. I think it's important we hear Psalm 91, verses 9 through 13. It says, if you say, the Lord is my refuge, and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you, no disaster will come near your tent, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all of your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And you will tread on the lion and cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. God promises his protection for you and I. But he also promises us that we will suffer. John 16:33 says this, I have told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world, you're going to have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Protection doesn't mean that you won't suffer, but when we suffer, we will always do so knowing there's a victory at the end and that nothing will ever get our lives outside of God's path for us. That is steady and secure and constant. And so they are protected, but the second thing and the final thing I want to point out to you today is that Mary and Joseph and Jesus are provided for by God. There's a lot of writing that's been done on the 3 gifts that the Magi give. Because there are 3 gifts, a lot of times people tend to think there are 3 wise men. There probably are not. There's probably more than 3. There's just 3 gifts. The Eastern Orthodox Church says that there's 12. That's probably because of the 12 tribes of Israel. The Western Church says it's 3 because of the 3 gifts. How many there are, we don't know, but it's probably not 3. It's probably not 12. Pick a number. It's probably that many. When people write Bible studies and devotions, there's a lot of sort of spiritual hay that can be made out of that. Gold is for the kingship of Jesus, and frankincense is for his priesthood, and myrrh is for his death, which would have been used to anoint the body. And I think that could all be true. I also think it might be thinking too hard about it. These gifts, really practically, are given to them to financially provide for them while they are in Egypt. That is their most basic use for them. Again, remember, these wise men, these magi, come to Herod's castle, and they come to give him in a palace a gift that is meant to honor the King of Kings and supposedly the child of Herod. These are meant to show the value of the entire Persian Empire for them and to help them be seen as people who are honoring and respecting what is happening in Israel. These are not just a little box of gold. This is substantive gifts to impress a king. The only thing now is that it's not being given in a palace. It's being given to people who are probably living in a barn. Tremendous amounts of gold, tremendous amounts of frankincense, tremendous amounts of myrrh, all of which are going to be used to provide for this holy family, yes, while they're in Egypt, yes, when they return back to Israel, but also probably for the entire raising of Jesus. They have the funds to live the life and to live the mission that God has called for them to do. I just want you to consider how long this plan has been coming. If indeed the Magi are first exposed to Daniel, that means that 700 years ago, God brought together Daniel and the wise men of Persia to have an interaction so that the Magi could know and see and understand a star and to travel and to bring this holy family gifts that would provide for them their greatest moments of need. A plan that started 700 years ago and has slowly moved to that day. That is how God works with us. He is not making things up as he goes. Your story is not something that he's suddenly grabbing his attention and needs to suddenly pay attention to what you're doing. God has been directing your life and your story, and he's set into place your protection, and he has provided your provisions for you long ago. And the great plan for your life is only slowly coming to be, but it is something that he has always seen and always known. So much so that he would bring foreign wise men 900 miles, 700 years later, to bring the financial gifts to the family that they need. Why is this story here? I think it's to remind us essentially what Philippians 4:19 says. My God, he will meet all of your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. I don't know what your needs are, but I know that Christmas is a time where we tend to feel them. We feel emotionally lonely. Our hearts grieve for those that we have lost. We feel financially strapped by the gifts that we can't give or by the gifts that we have given. It's a time where usually we feel a little bit of loneliness with the Christmas cheer, a little bit of sadness that could mix with all of the joy, a little bit of limit amidst all of the abundance. But the promise of God that comes through out of the Christmas story is that God has the means, the ability, and the heart to always provide for our needs. Look, this Christmas, you might be surrounded by so many different threats: financial threats, health threats, relational threats, career threats, threats to your faith. And those threats, they're real. They're not nothing. It's okay if you're scared and terrified and don't know how this is all going to work out. You have good reason to be nervous. There are real threats against you, and they can't always just be easily dismissed. You're not crazy. But you have a God who, although the threats are real, promises to both protect you and to also provide for you. And my hope is that that reality will seep into your bones, and that it will be greater than any of the fear and greater than any of the anxiety you experience this Christmas. At Coastline, we do something really great, which is that we light the Advent candle, which is kind of our slow way of us getting ready for the birth of Christ. But the way that we do this is that we also try to pass this light on to one another. And so I'll take the candle, I'll come down to the front row, and as we pass the lights backwards, we commit ourselves again to being God's beloved family. That's part of our desire here at Coastline, to live as a family, but also to pass on the message of Christ, the joy of Christmas, and also the encouragement that God is with us, never more so than in the Christmas story. So would you grab your candles, we'll light them together.
Away in a manger, no crib for a bed, the little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head. The stars in the sky looked down where he lay. The little Lord Jesus asleep on the hay. The cattle are lowing, the baby awakes, the dawn of salvation beginning to break. I love thee, Lord Jesus, O gift from above, the King of the heavens, forever with for all of my days. The highest of praises be unto your name, my God and my Savior, my King and my friend. Yours is the glory forever. Thousand generations all falling down in worship to sing the song of ages to the Lamb. All who've gone before us and all who will believe, we sing the song of ages to the Lamb. Your name is the highest, your name, it's the greatest, your name stands above them all. All thrones and dominions, all powers and positions, your name stands above them all. And the angels cry, all creation cry, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. If you've been forgiven, if you've been redeemed, sing the song forever to the Lamb. If you walk in freedom, if you bear his name, sing the song forever to the Lamb. We'll sing the song forever and amen. And the angels cry, holy, you are lifted high. God, we thank you today, our God, our light. You are holy forever. You're set apart and other forever. You are ruling forever. You are reigning forever. You are enthroned forever. So God, as we think about you being a protector, you being one who cares, what a beautiful, wonderful thought it is that you'll be doing that forever, for all eternity, that there's nothing we can do or say to pluck ourselves from your hand. But instead, God, we are forever in your grace, forever in your love, forever protected by the King of Kings, the Holy One, forever and ever and ever. So God, this Christmas, as we walk into that, Lord, may we do so remembering that you are the reason that we celebrate, that you are the reason that we give praise and thanks, and you are the joy this season. So we love you, God. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, if you've got any need, we've got prayer partners up front who would love to pray for you, so come on forward for that. We love you guys. We'll see you guys on Christmas Eve. Go in peace.